Good Friday evening, everyone. This is UD Weather here, back with another tropical update on Hurricane Dorian at September 1st, 2019. And as the sun is starting to set on Dorian right now, looking at the visible satellite, we're starting to lose that daylight as it is 6:44 p.m. as I'm recording this. And so the sun's starting to set in much of these areas, especially down here in the tropics, as the days are starting to get shorter. But as you can see, it's a very perfectly symmetrical hurricane, Category 5 now, actually. So that makes it 4 consecutive years in a row now where there's been at least one Category 5 system in the Atlantic. Of course, in 2016 we had Matthew, and in 2017 we had both Irma and Maria, and last year, of course, we had Michael, which was upgraded in the postseason analysis, and then this year we have Dorian. And if we look at the infrared satellite, you can, if it loads, you can see how symmetrical it is, especially that eye. It looks like something that you'd see more in the West Pacific rather than the Atlantic, but it's a very powerful storm with winds all the way up to 185 miles an hour now sustained. So it's one of the strongest systems that we've ever seen in the Atlantic. It's tied for second place, I believe, with Wilma and the Labor Day Hurricane 1935, as well as Hurricane Gilbert. And it's 5 miles an hour away from the record for strongest winds, which is Hurricane Allen back in 1980, which had winds of 190 miles an hour. Now, it doesn't look like it's going to beat that record, as it is starting to show a little bit of signs of maybe some slight weakening happening as it's going over the Bahamas, which have been getting absolutely destroyed and blasted by these Category 5 winds. Wind gusts have been up to over 200 miles an hour over the past few hours as it approaches now the Grand Bahama Island. Probably a slight disruption to the circulation, which will probably cause it to weaken a little bit, as well as an eye wall replacement cycle, which is likely to happen soon. And so it's going to start weakening. As it starts slowing down as well, you can also see that it's been slowing down recently, currently only moving now to the west at 5 miles an hour. So it's definitely starting to lose that that westward speed, and it's going to start to make that turn up to the northwest relatively soon. Now, a quick look at the rest of the Atlantic Basin. We have a few disturbances here and there, not really much of a big deal. We got one going out to sea with 30% chance in 5 days, one with a 30% chance 5 days going to the Bay of Campeche towards Mexico. And then we got another one going out to sea with a 70% chance in the next 5 days. But none of these are probably going to be any major impacts to land. So really, Dorian's still going to be the main focus. And as you can see, now a pressure of 910 millibars, so one of the most intense storms in the Atlantic as well. Again, nowhere near the record, which was Wilma in 2005 with a pressure of 882 millibars, which probably won't be broken anytime soon, but it's definitely up there. And as you can see, moving to the west now, 5 miles an hour. So slowing down significantly. It was moving at 8 to 9 miles an hour just several hours ago. So it's beginning to slow down, and it's going to start to stall for a bit, and then make its northward motion as it approaches the Florida coastline. Now, if we look at the forecast discussion, you can see that it's going to take a while for it to weaken as well. For the next 24 hours from now, it's still forecast to be a Category 5 with winds of 165 miles an hour because the conditions are still relatively favorable, and it's going to take a long time for the system to weaken. But it is forecast to start weakening as it starts to move further north into a more high shear environment. And so in 36 hours, though, still forecast to be a strong Category 4. In 2 days, still a Category 4. Still a Category 3 in 3 days. Then finally should weaken to a Category 1 in 5 days' time as it approaches the Carolina coast. However, it's going to be a much larger system by then as well. So the impacts will be more widespread. And even now, the system is getting larger as the tropical storm winds now extend 140 miles an hour. And hurricane force winds are now extending 45 miles. So it's likely that even the Florida coast, while they may not see a direct landfall anymore, although it's still going to be kind of really close, they're still going to see some impacts, and that's why we do have hurricane warnings now up for the eastern coast of Florida, for much of the area, Cape Canaveral down to around West Palm Beach, that area. And as you can see from the 5-day cone, it's going to start making that turn around Monday afternoon, it looks like. And then it's going to start to parallel the Florida coast, coming really close to landfall. If we turn on the track, you can see that it's going to come within 50 miles of the shore. So they could definitely see winds near hurricane force and probably some heavy rainfall, similar to Matthew back in 2016 as it paralleled the coast and came close to landfall. but a direct landfall in Florida is not looking too likely at this point. So it looks like they'll at least avoid the worst of the storm, which is good news. However, not sure if the same can be said for the Carolinas, especially North Carolina, as the path does have it dangerously close to the Outer Banks in North Carolina, and it could make a landfall there before hopefully finally heading out to sea after that. But that would still be 5 days from now, so still a lot can change, and this thing could definitely move further east, or it could move in further west, and we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. And for the intensity forecast, the models, as you can see, a few of them keep it at category 5 for the next 7 days, which makes absolutely no sense. So I would ignore those. But as you can see, it's going to start to lose intensity over the next several days as it approaches land and eventually could possibly make landfall. But it's going to take a long time to weaken. So it's still going to be a strong system, even if you're up in the Carolinas. So you should definitely be paying attention to this and hopefully getting ready and evacuating if necessary. And looking at the wind shear again, the wind shear is a little bit higher in this area, so that'll prevent the storm from strengthening further, absolutely. But it will take a while to weaken. It'll take a while for the wind shear to actually have an impact as well. And now if we look at the forecast track, the model track guidance is mostly now clustered just off the Florida coast and then taking it to very close to the Outer Banks of North Carolina before then taking it out to sea or potentially impacting Nova Scotia as an extra tropical, non-tropical low. It's still a powerful system though, but Nova Scotia could see some impacts down the line. That would be 6 to 7 days out though. But as you can see, Florida is not in the clear yet. There are still a few models that do take it very close, or even a couple models here that still have a landfall in Florida. So it's not totally out of the question. However, it does look like the eye should stay offshore, but they could still get a little bit of the eye wall that's still possible. So they could still see some definitely tropical storm force winds are probably guaranteed for much of the Florida coast, and the hurricane force winds are still possible and could still happen. Now, if we look at the main models, the GFS model, as of the latest 18Z, it has Dorian making that turn a little bit further east than the previous runs. However, it has it stalling and then has it going northwest and very close to the northeastern Florida coast. Has it very close to the Jacksonville area. So again, that area could see some hurricane force winds, but they should avoid the worst of the storm, which is good news for them. However, not good news is that it's going to be coming very close to North Carolina, and actually the GFS here has a landfall in about 4 days, right around Thursday afternoon to Thursday evening, bringing it right near Wilmington, which this is definitely further west than the previous runs. And then after that, it has it going out to sea. However, it does could bring some tropical storm force winds even to southern New England areas of Massachusetts, Cape Cod, Nantucket Island, Martha's Vineyard. They could be seeing some potentially heavy rain and some gusty winds, but they should be in the clear as far as direct impacts from the center of the system or anything like that. They shouldn't be getting the worst of it. However, it's still early for that area because if we look at the upper air situation right now, you can see that the system is going to be moving towards the north and then slowly drifting northeast. Pretty weak steering currents. However, since it's a strong system, most strong systems automatically, due to the Coriolis effect, start to move north and to the east, just as a natural thing that happens. As you can see, a trough starts to form in Michigan as Dorian is right around the Outer Banks. However, the trough comes too late, and so it pushes out to sea. If the trough came a little earlier, though, it's possible that it would bring Dorian closer to the east coast, to the northeast. So it's still on the table, though, and it still could come closer and bring some potentially devastating, damaging winds and some heavy rain to the northeast as well. So they're not the northeast isn't in the clear yet, as well as New England. So they should also be watching this system closely. And if we look at the European model, the latest run, if you look at the 12Z Sunday run, if it loads, it takes a while to load. You can see that right now the pressure is way off. There's been a lot of issues regarding the initialization of the pressure. It's always been much higher than what actually is, because obviously right now the storm's at 910. It's not 976. That would be a category 2. Disregarding that, you can see the European takes it a little bit closer to Florida than the GFS did. And then it has, though, a landfall not quite as far inland as the GFS did, but it does have a landfall in the Outer Banks around Cape Fear, Cape Hatteras area in North Carolina. But then it does bring it out to sea, at least from the U.S. But then whatever's left, the extratropical storm will be going into the Canadian Maritimes up in Nova Scotia and potentially up in Newfoundland. They could also be seeing some impacts. And for the upper air for the European model, it does also have that trough that starts in Minnesota and then eventually it will be coming down into Michigan area by hour 144. However, it's too late by then, so the system should be going out to sea. So hopefully the northeastern area of the U.S. Avoids direct impacts. However, the Carolinas are definitely on the table, and even Florida still not in the clear yet. Could be seeing some damaging winds up in that area, as well as some heavy storm surge and rainfall. And hopefully, anyone who's in the path or could be in the path stays safe.